College to CEO Executive Speaker Series. Now, a quick word on this series. We're introducing this for the first time. The objective of this series is to, have current industry leaders, C-suite executives come join us and talk about their journey, their experiences that they've had in their life from being a college student to where they are today, and how those experiences have groomed the leader they are today. What they did right, what they did wrong, and I'd love to hear the stories and experiences of these C-suite executives, and hopefully learn a lot from those. Without much ado, let me welcome Rachel Hutter. Like I said, Senior Vice President, Disney. Super great human being, and I've loved her a lot, interacting with her a lot recently. So let's have her introduce herself.
Hi, thank you all for joining. I'm excited to talk to you. When we first started talking about this series, I said, you may talk to other people who may have very exciting titles and what have you, but I doubt you'll find anyone who loves their job as much as I do. So when I was a student at MSU, I graduated in '93 from the College of Electrical and Computer Engineering. I actually got a concentration in theater specifically because I was hoping that would be attractive to Disney. I have wanted to work for Disney my entire life. It didn't work out for me coming right out of school. At the time I graduated, we didn't have a good engineering intern program. We have a great one now, which I'm really proud to have had a hand in helping form. But I couldn't get with Disney right away, so I did a bunch of other things. I had done some medical research for the Veterans Administration. I worked for General Motors while I was at school as a co-op. And then I worked for General Mills for a couple of years. And then I worked for Allen Bradley, which does factory automation. And then I finally had my chance to come to Disney. So I joined Disney in 1997. I joined as a ride control programmer, and I was initially put on the project to build Disney's Animal Kingdom. So that was near and dear to my heart. I am a Prius driving, tree hugging vegetarian, and that park with its environmental message and its celebration of wild things and wild places just absolutely spoke to my heart. And in my 23 years at Disney, almost 24 years at Disney now, I've had about 11 different jobs. So one of the things that was sort of an unexpected blessing working for Disney is that Disney is very, very open to you having a lifelong learning career. So I've had a lot of opportunities to move into different functions at Disney so that I could learn new things. And that was very different. Other companies I worked at, when I asked, what are my opportunities to explore different learning experiences, I kind of got the response, you're a controls engineer, we hired you to be a controls engineer, and you'll be a controls engineer 1 and then 2 and then 3 and so on down the line. So some folks love that. For them, it's the depth of learning. If for you, it's the breadth of learning, that's one thing I would advise you that I kind of fell into by accident because I just love the product of Disney. But if you really want a wide breadth of learning, make sure you get with a company that's open to those types of lateral moves that give you those different opportunities. The other thing that to me is really special about Disney is that increasingly we're this very wide and diverse world, and yet we all need those cultural touchstones that we've all sort of seen and experienced and have touched our hearts and touched our souls in some way. And one of the things I love about Disney, I travel all over the world for my job at Disney. I have teams in Hong Kong and Shanghai, Tokyo, Paris. So I have business travel, but I also like to travel just for my own broadening learning experience. And I sort of play a little game with myself when I got on the plane of seeing how many people come on the plane until somebody's wearing a Disney t-shirt. And I have never in my life, anywhere in the world, including, remote places in Egypt, ever been anywhere where there wasn't eventually someone who came on with a Disney t-shirt. And I feel a great sense of pride in that, because I think as humankind, we need to have those things that we mutually share. And I think Disney is a big part of that. And I I love that. This past year has been really interesting for me because up until that point, my career has been very exclusive in parks and resorts, which is fantastic. I love roller coasters. I love the parks experience when I was a kid. Those are some of my best memories, having those vacations at Walt Disney World. But I'm not going to lie, I love myself a good Marvel movie too. And that was a part of the business I just hadn't personally had a connection to up until recently. And when COVID hit and the whole world was kind of scrambling, trying to figure out what are the right things to do to keep everybody safe and to keep our businesses running responsibly. I was fortunate enough to be able to be part of setting that strategy and working with the other divisions to put the right protocols in place. So it's been fantastic to even after all these years still have a lot of experiences that keep me on a really high learning curve, because I love that. And for me, that's one of the things that makes the job fulfilling. So as far as what I wish I had known when I was a student, I will start by saying I wish I had known how absolutely fun it is to be an engineer. I really had some moments where just the grind of I'm trying to pass calculus and physics and all of these theory courses that are preparing me for the applied engineering but aren't really the applied engineering. There were times that was so grueling, and other people I knew had suntans and they were out all the time because their majors didn't have quite the study load that engineering has. And I thought, what am I doing? Is this going to be the rest of my life where I'm locked in a room doing math problems? And I don't want to live like that. And I just want to tell you from the other side, the problems that my team and I get to solve as engineers at Disney are fascinating, and they're diverse and they're unique and complex and they're collaborative and multidisciplined. And it's so much fun. I absolutely love what we do. And if this gives you a little bit of energy to get through, I hope that helps, because what you're doing now is hard, and it's not what the end state is. The end state is so much better. And it's great you're getting this background. It'll help you learn how to think, because by the time you graduate, most of the things you'll have learned will already be obsolete. You'll get with a company and there'll be a whole bunch of new things to learn. And that's great. But you're learning how to learn, and that's the takeaway, not the formulas, right? You'll look those up when you get to the job where you use them or not. So I wish I'd known that, because I think that would have helped sustain my energy. And I mentioned this on my LinkedIn. If by the way, if you're not connected to me on LinkedIn and want to be, please connect. I love connecting with engineering students, particularly Michigan State engineering students. But I wish I had understood how important enough sleep and good exercise and eating right are to your brain. I mean, there were definitely weeks where I was just, barely left my chair and I was just head down studying. And in retrospect, I should have gone to bed, gotten up, gone for a run, and then gone back to the studying. And I think I would have understood the material better, frankly. I mean, our minds can't work in this constant marathon of trying to cram information in them. We're intended to have really sharp focus and then have a period of reflection on what we've learned. And I'm a big believer that the more you exercise your body, the better able you are to do those things. So I wish I would have done that. I think I would have done better and I would have enjoyed it more. So let's see. There is a question. Do you want to ask some questions, or do you want me to look at the questions? How do you want to proceed?
We can get to the questions slowly. I'd love to take you through a couple more things before that. So typically what I want to do is take you back to your college days and, ask you a few questions about then, because as of right now, I'd love to know what you were thinking back then, right? So I don't know if you guys can figure out from Rachel's virtual background, but Rachel is a proud Spartan. And I want to know, when you were studying in the Michigan State College of Engineering, what major did you study? Why that specific major? And what I really want you to answer is, we as engineers, throughout our study at the College of Engineering, there are several times where we question, why am I doing engineering? Like, is this really worth it? So what was your plan at the beginning? Why the major, and how did you deal with that?
Sure. Yeah, great questions. So I got my degree in electrical and computer engineering, and obviously there's different areas of that field. Mine was specifically controls engineering. And it's funny. I'm on the board, Professor Kempel's board of the college, the advisory board for the College of Engineering. And we recently talked to some students, and we were talking about their majors and why they pick their majors. And one of the students sort of made a comment about electrical being more kind of intuitive and less tangible than mechanical or structural, that are sort of the more tangible engineering fields. And I found that kind of interesting. I don't know how many of you have done a Myers-Briggs type analysis, but I've done that, and I'm very high on the intuition, versus the sensing. So I think sort of working on things that I don't necessarily have to be able to touch to understand how they operate feels comfortable to me. And I think it's good to find a discipline in engineering that feels intuitive to you, because you can learn all the information, but there's a certain point where you just sort of have to feel how it works. And I think which discipline you choose, whether you enjoy that discipline or not, somewhat depends on whether it feels intuitive to you. So I was glad that was the discipline I chose. I chose it because I had been doing some work in the Veterans Administration with spinal cord injury patients, and it was using functional electrical stimulation in two ways. One, to exercise the muscles of recently spinal cord injured patients so that their muscles didn't atrophy really quickly if they were experiencing spinal shock. Because often people are unable to walk after an injury, not because they've severed their spinal cord, but because the muscles atrophy so quickly when you're not standing and walking, that often, even though you have that neurologically intact nervous system, your muscles have just atrophied away. So we would do that to keep the muscle strong. And then we used control signal to read, and we would exercise the different joints of the ankle and the knee to develop prosthetics that moved as naturally as possible compared to how the body's joints naturally move. So I loved that kind of work, and I really loved the controls aspect of it more so than the structural aspects of it. So all of that kind of led me to ECE. Like I said, I did a concentration in theater, and I highly recommend you doing a concentration in a sort of tangential field of something you have great interest in, for a couple of reasons. One, I'm a big believer that innovation is creativity plus engineering, and so feeding that creative side is really important. So that you think about a problem not just in the technical, how does it work, but in the creative, how could it work kind of realm. But the other thing is, I took all of my theater classes my senior year, which was fantastic, because when everybody's interviewing for jobs and it's a difficult job market, and it's very stressful and that kind of thing, it was great because all my classes were with theater people who were thrilled when I got job interviews and job offers, because it wasn't like they were going to go for that job anyway. So it was kind of nice to be in a slightly different environment in that really tense time at the end of your college career. So I definitely advise that if you have something that speaks to you.
I love to hear that, getting into an engineering job now feels like, a fascinating thing, and you're enjoying what you're doing, because I definitely had several times where I'm questioning it. But what you said regarding my last question transitions well into my next. How important do you think it is for us to get involved on campus with organizations or off-campus organizations and stuff? And how will it help us go a long way in the corporate world?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's two things I did when I was a student that I think really, really helped me in my career. One is I was a part of the team that was working on a hybrid electric vehicle, which at the time in '93 was pretty revolutionary. Now, lots of vehicles on the street have that technology. But it was great to have multidisciplinary hands-on engineering experience because, your classes are very, very singular, and there's no problem worth solving that doesn't require a bunch of engineers with different experience to combine their experience to deliver a whole solution. So I was glad I started having those experiences while I was in school. That was really helpful. And I think the earlier in your scholastic career you do that, the more you will choose the right electives that sort of interleave with where you want to go. So my son, for example, he's studying electrical computer engineering also. And his goal, he really wants to work for SpaceX. And so he's involved in Gator Motorsports. He goes to University of Florida. And he's really sort of learning what aspects of controls sort of tie into mechanical and combustion engines and all those kinds of things. And it helps him decide, for those technical electives, what is it I want to learn to complement what I want to be when I'm done. So I think that's really helpful. And, most engineering work is in a team environment. So building those skills and learning how to disagree about technical solutions and how to learn from mistakes in technical solutions. It's great to have that learning before you get into your job where it sort of follows you around, and in many ways, I'm glad, as much as it was heart-wrenching to me to not get a job with Disney right out of school, I'm really glad in retrospect I didn't get a job with Disney right out of school, because you just make mistakes when you're first starting out. There's certain things that, for example, anything you design, you need to design with room for expansion. You need to recognize that what it needs to do right now is just right now. And, a month from now, a year from now, there's going to be different functionality and different inputs and outputs that need to be part of the solution. So if you design something really compact where there's no expansion room as it needs to change and evolve, it makes it really difficult for the people that come behind you. Anything you design, anything you build is going to break, and somebody's got to maintain it. So I look at some early designs where it was difficult to get in the maintenance cabinet, or it was difficult to see the lights to troubleshoot it, those kinds of things. I would have designed that differently. Once I moved into the maintenance realm and I was the one that had to fix stuff, I got very frustrated with the people who didn't think about the fact that somebody has to fix it. So I think learning those things is all really, really great. The other thing I did is I was a resident assistant. I was actually a resident assistant within housing for 3 years. And I still use things today that I learned as an RA, because there's just such leadership you have to learn in a role like that. You really have to influence other students. You need to hold people accountable. You have to have difficult conversations. You really need to deliver and develop sort of your empathy and your emotional intelligence, because you're working with a lot of people who may not get along and may not understand why they don't get along. And it's your job to figure out how they can work together. And you've got to be able to sort of read from them where those pain points are that they may not know how to even articulate. And when you become a leader at work, those same dynamics are at play. So I'm thrilled I had an opportunity to learn that early on, and I still use that often.
It's nice to hear that. I mean, we've been told how important our GPAs are, but it's nice to hear that, things that don't go on a transcript are also just as helpful. So going into the next question, you spoke about how your original goal was getting into Disney and how your son's goal is getting into SpaceX. How important is it for us to set a goal early on, as specific as saying, hey, I want to work at Disney, or I want to work at engineering? And how do we cope with situations where it doesn't go as we planned, and how do we pivot into, better situations?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I'm actually going to take a step back and address the point of the pressure for your GPA, because I remember, hearing that over and over again. And Fortunately, my dad always said your GPA only matters for your first job at school. And after that, no one will ever ask about it again. So if the difference between getting a 4.0 and getting a 3.5 is to get the 4.0, you never get to spend time with your friends and you never get to play sports, and all you have to do is study. And that eats away 20 hours of your week every week. It's better to get the 3.5. I mean, you really just need to be above the threshold needed to get the interview. So I think it's important to balance those things. And I can tell you, as a mom with two kids, sort of learning when enough is enough versus it has to be a 4.0 in everything you do is a really important life lesson, because the more things you add to your life, the more fulfilling your life is, but only when you can balance them all. And that means you have to make those decisions of, good enough. So I think those are important. As far as, do you have to be able to very precisely say this is the dream or not? I don't think you do. For me, I just had such visceral, amazing experiences as a kid at Walt Disney World, and this strong feeling that my life's work should be to create those for other people. That doesn't mean that there aren't 50 other things I could have done that would have been fulfilling and made me happy. And if you've not sort of felt that, oh my gosh, it's got to be this specific job at this specific company, that's totally fine. In fact, I think most often people are happier if they can sort of say, I want to do the type of job where I work for a big company that has lots of opportunities to move around the country or move around the world. And it's a recognizable product that people feel good about, like a General Mills, feeding the world, a company that does a lot for the community. I like Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Who doesn't? I think it's important to like the product. But I think if you feel, wow, I haven't been called to a specific place, that may be a good thing. I've even out of my time at Disney, I always tell people I've had 11 different jobs. 9 of them were my dream job and 2 of them weren't. And that's okay. Sometimes you get into something and you think, I'm going to love this. And then you do it and you realize, wow, I'm wired differently than I thought I was. Life's a whole journey about figuring out what brings you fulfillment and how you make the world a better place. And it's really rare to know exactly what that's supposed to be right out of college. And I think it's fine if you sort of directionally say, I like the transportation industry, or I like the entertainment industry, or I like the food industry, and I'll figure it out from there what I'm called to do. I think that's great, actually. It's probably easier to find fulfillment if it's not so specific that, you're shooting a dart at the bullseye and there's more chance that you'll miss than hit.
So it's more about aligning your passions with the job you end up at than the company itself.
Yes, yes.
Oh, that's nice to hear that. And I would love to work at Disney. Disney's earlier you were listing things you like about Disney, and one thing I like about Disney is everything. You know, Lion King is still one of the best movies I've seen. It was my childhood, and even now I'm a big fan of Marvel. So let's talk a little bit about Disney. It is incredible that you've spent about 2 decades at Disney in 11 different jobs, and I'm still amazed at how you've climbed up the corporate ladder at Disney. And so I'd love for you to talk about that for a second. What do you think were the core values or your beliefs that helped you climb the corporate ladder? And what could we as young students take away from that?
Yeah, I think there's 2 big things. One is curiosity. So I had this funny moment. So I was hired into Disney, and I was part of the Imagineering team that built Animal Kingdom. And I came in and I had no idea what photo eye sensors Disney liked to use. And so I asked around and people said, use whatever you like. So I used what we used in food processing at General Mills, because that's what I knew. And I knew the specs, off the top of my head. And it was sort of easy to say, okay, I want this, this, and this. And then, of course, I fell in love with Animal Kingdom, and I didn't want to leave to go to a different project. And so I moved into a position as a reliability engineer so that I could stay with the park. And we on the Kilimanjaro Safari were having issues with these sensors that I had installed, and so we were out in the field, and it was hot and it was wet, and we're trying to troubleshoot these sensors, and there's bugs and all this kind of stuff. And one of the maintenance guys says, "I would sure love to know who the asshole is that spec'd these sensors." And I said, "That was me." I said, what should I have spec'd? And he said, "Well, these are fine if you're like inside a factory or something, but we're outside. It's a different environment. And so we always use this manufacturer's photo eyes." And I said, "Well, does this happen with other sensors or other pieces of equipment?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, they always put in this and then we pull it out and put this in instead." And so I thought, wow, I know everyone I worked with on the Imagineering team to build Animal Kingdom passionately wanted to put in equipment that the maintenance team would like. And if I made these mistakes, we all made a lot of mistakes on these kinds of things. So I went to my boss and said, "I would like to find somebody at each of the theme parks and put together a preferred manufacturer's database where we can give this to Imagineering, and anytime they're building something new, they don't have to think about, oh, what photo eye should I use? Like, we'll explain in this environment for this type of thing, use this." And we can build it out, so it's conceptual as well as specific. So when you're talking a variable frequency drive, for example, we know we want one that has good documentation and good tech support and has good backward compatibility as it goes through different evolutions, and all of these different criteria. And that way, if there's some new manufacturer's product that's available, somebody at least knows how to think about comparing it to what we've laid out. And my boss was like, "Well, who's asking you to do this?" And I said, "Well, no one's asking me. I just think it would be helpful." And so he's like, "All right, well, if you have the energy to do it, go for it." And it ended up not only being a valuable tool, but I think the whole idea of, rather than being embarrassed that I installed the wrong sensor, I was curious about, how do we install the right sensor? And then how do we make it easier for the next me to install the right sensor? And I have a firm belief that unless someone specifically says, it is not your job to do this, like, it is all open game, man. If you see a problem and you see a way to make it better, that is why we became engineers, so that we can make things better and, dive in with both feet and give a solution of, here's what I can do to help solve this problem. And that's really been a big piece of my career at Disney. It seems like I've seen a lot of opportunities to work with really experienced, smart people and come up with ways to make things better and easier for other people. We had another circumstance at Animal Kingdom. This is all before your time, and you'll go, "Oh my gosh, you people were so old." But back in the day, the way we would post those wait signs that says, it's 50 minutes to ride Expedition Everest or what have you, we would have paper cards, and somebody would look at their watch and write down the time and give the card to someone in line and say, give it to somebody at the front of the line. Then that person would gather the cards, look at their watch. The watches weren't synchronized. And, they'd write down a time. And then an hour later, somebody would enter it into a database and update the sign. So they were never right. And I thought, well, it wasn't even my problem, right? There was nothing to maintain. It wasn't a system. But I supported the operations team. And so I would go to the operations team staff meetings and just say, what causes you headaches? What are irritants for you? And they said, "Oh, it drives us crazy, all these angry guest letters we get over, your sign said 30 minutes and I waited an hour and my baby was crying and it was terrible and it ruined my day." And I said, "Well, that would be really easy to solve with radio frequency tags. All we have to do is just have a reader and a card, and we can even forecast based on getting the data in and time of day. So I got with the other engineers I worked with and said, what do you think? And we all felt like that was a pretty easy thing to do. And so we went to a vendor and said, can we borrow some product? We want to do a proof of concept. So they gave us the product. We didn't even buy anything. And we put the system in at Kilimanjaro Safari, and the vendor said we could borrow the product for 2 weeks. So we explained to the team, it's going to be 2 weeks that we're going to run this experiment. And at the end of the 2 weeks, honestly, our operations cast members like formed a human chain around the readers where they're like, we are not giving up this equipment. We're not going back to those crazy cards. This is the way we want to do it. And that system is installed around the world now. I mean, I've upgraded many, many times from then. But I think just asking people what causes you pain and how can I make it better? And then using your engineering skills, even in something that didn't appear to be an engineering problem, that's where you really add value to a company.
That's super cool. I mean, based on what you said, what I get is two major things. One would be, and I've heard this phrase a lot, do more than you, no, it was do more than you have to do for your team. And, if you're really passionate about what you're doing, I think it would be pretty easy. And the second one, this would be pretty easy for my fellow engineers. If you find a problem, solve it. That's why we're engineers, right? So if that's your secret to climbing up 11 positions to senior vice president at Disney, I'm definitely going to try it out. So, I'm seeing that there are a lot of questions in the chat, so I don't want to take too much time more. So I'm going to head over to my last couple of questions, and this is something that I really want you to answer. Back in your college days, just when you graduated or in your early career, what were some of the things that you felt you could have done different or you regret doing? What were those mistakes in your life that perhaps set you back that we can avoid? And on the contrary, what were some of the things that you did really well and what were right that we could try and inculcate in our lives?
Yeah, and some things just kind of happen by accident. So I'll share one. When I started working at General Mills, I started in the engineering department, and my boss said, here's the National Electric Code. For the next 3 weeks, just read through the National Electric Code. I mean, can you imagine anything more boring than that is a reference book. You're supposed to be like, okay, what size wire do I need for this? But you're not supposed to read it page to page. And fortunately, just because I am an off the chart extrovert, when I first joined General Mills, I had just sort of walked around introducing myself to people, and I met the maintenance guys that were responsible for fixing the manufacturing line when things broke down. And, they kind of thought I was a weird novelty. and so anytime something would break down, they would get on the radio and say, hey, Hutter, we need your college brain to come figure this out. And they didn't need me at all. In essence, they were saying oh, this is kind of fun. This is a complex problem, and maybe you could learn something if you come look at it, right? And it was great because I learned so much. And I wouldn't have known, hey, you really need to meet the maintenance guys and ask them to help teach you stuff. It just happened to be happenstance that, I just sort of made some connections, and then they were generous enough to share their knowledge. But they were so smart. And, I took that with me from place to place of there can be an elitism with engineers where we think, well, we're the ones who design it, so we know the most, but the people who maintain it, you can't design something good without working with the people who maintain it. So wherever you work, get to know the maintenance team because they will make you a better engineer for sure. So that was fortunate. I think another thing that I'm glad I did is when I was working at General Mills, the way things worked is you would go from project to project. And so you'd be relocated from place to place. And when you were relocated, you'd fly out every Monday morning and you'd work all week, and then you'd fly back Friday night. And I did that on a couple of projects, and I noticed that it was really hard on my marriage. You know, my husband and I were newly married, and being apart from each other all that long, would just make us kind of snap at each other when we got home. And a lot of the people I worked with were divorced. And so I went and talked to my boss and said, look, I absolutely want to pay my dues. I'm not trying to ask for special treatment by any means, but I need to know when I'm settled in a place, or could I get a master's degree in food science and then, work in research and development on new product, or how do I get to a point where I'm not traveling like this because it's hard on my marriage? And he sort of said, look, this is what we hired you to do. This is what engineering is. Fortunately, I said, that's not the life I want for myself. And even though that's a great company and there's a lot of people that are super happy there, it wasn't going to allow me to be the kind of wife I wanted to be and have the whole rest of my life that I wanted. And I'm glad I listened to that because I remember talking to my parents about it and sort of getting that advice of, just stick with it, you'll settle in. I'm a big believer that you don't want to settle. Settling is just never the goal, right? And that's not to say that it's good to hop around all the time, because I really believe when you move to a new job, for a while, you are just extracting value from the company because you're learning a whole bunch of stuff, but you don't know enough to add value. And after you do that for a certain amount of time, then you get to a point where you're adding more value than you're extracting, because now you know a lot, you can contribute a lot, but you're not learning that much. And I really believe that's a curve, and you got to take the area under both. And you have an obligation to not leave to go someplace new until you pay back the value you've extracted. And I've seen people that as soon as they cross that line, look for a new job and just hop and hop and hop. And as a hiring leader, it makes me nervous when I see people doing that, because it should be a give and take between you and the company. You want to learn, and that's fabulous, but you also want to make sure you're adding value to compensate for the amount you're learning. So I think finding that right balance when you know you're not in the right place isn't always easy. And I think it's something to be attentive to.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, these are some amazing experiences. And something that I gain out of this, and I want to share this with everybody, is no matter who you speak to, everything that they share comes down to the simple stuff: clear communication, passion, and just trying to do the best that you can, right? But as myself, I never really understood how to inculcate this in my life, and that's what we're trying to do here at the College to CEO Speaker Series. Take such live examples, learn from these people as to how they reacted, and let's make the best of that in our lives, right? So, first question I see is by Pratik Joshi.
Yeah, actually, I would like to ask that question to Rachel. So like in today's modern times, I mean, when I see like major IT companies or major like big companies have their CEOs who are like highly educated, like they are engineers and also have like an MBA degree. So like, has it become like essential, or is it like a trend nowadays that companies prefer those people, or is it like important that they have like learned through their experiences and that's why they are like at that position?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've seen both, right? I think the important thing is we have this formula we use at Disney that you need management skills plus leadership skills. And then you add those together and you multiply them by your relationship skills and by your technical aptitude, because the technology is always changing. So you need to have the aptitude to keep learning it. And if you're going to lead people, you need to set a vision, you need to inspire the team, you need to pick great people to work on the team, and then you have to manage it, right? You have to manage projects and time and resources and budgets and all those kinds of things. And then everything you do really is collaborative. So you've got to have those relationship skills where you can work together through the hard times. Sometimes an MBA can really help you pick up those management and leadership skills and maybe even the relationship skills, but it's not always necessary. And I've had people work for me that started an advanced degree program and they're so focused on their studies that they don't do their job well. And I do not have an MBA. I have some specific classes towards a master's in industrial engineering, but I never finished the program to have the MS. It was more, I want to understand this and I want to understand that. And I sort of picked up how I wanted to augment what I knew through academics. And that's worked great for me. Some companies, the credential is worth a lot. I have my PE licensure. I have my certified safety professional licensure. Licensure is big at Disney. It shows you have the ability to learn and master and prove that you have the knowledge. I've found those to be better investments than having an MBA. But I think having a well-rounded skill set is really important. And I think being excellent at what you do is really important. So I think it's really important that however you're augmenting your education, you're not doing it to the detriment of being great at your job.
Thank you. That helped a lot.
Thank you. So next we have Cameron.
So here's my question. What does your average workday look like? Do you have any set routines or daily habits that you keep?
Yeah, so I always, no matter where I am in the world, start the morning with a workout, non-negotiable. Jet lagged, 4 hours of sleep on a flight to Paris, and I land in the morning and I drop my suitcase at the hotel and I make sure I exercise. That's just how I sort of reset my clock and get my brain going. But other than that, there is no such thing as an ordinary day for me. I mean, that's one of the things I love about my job is it's very diverse. I have very few set reoccurring meetings. Right now with COVID, I have an hour every day that I spend with my brain trust. So these are just unbelievably smart people in my team. And it's engineers and safety professionals and doctors and industrial hygienists and lawyers. And, we really think through everything that's in the news. And, what did Moderna's CEO statement about the South African variant really mean? And does this affect how we think about educating our employees about vaccinations? Really sort of what's happening, how do we get a mutual understanding of it, and what does it mean to our business? That's really the only reoccurring meeting I have. Otherwise, my schedule is a little bit learning, a little bit informing, a little bit guiding efforts to make sure that my team is always doing highest, best use of their time and energy for the advancement of Disney. But I don't like a very consistent schedule. I find that kind of boring. So I like the fact that I have a lot of spontaneity in my day.
Oh, Cameron said he's at work, so he wants me to ask the question. And his question is, I'm a long-time Disney fan. The combination of engineering and aesthetics fascinates me within the parks. The question I have for you is, what tips do you have integrating technology into aesthetics? Also, do you have any tips regarding communication with artists within the field?
Yeah, it's honestly helped me a lot having that concentration in theater, because often the creative folks can sort of feel frustrated that engineers can be just sort of this big dose of reality always, and they may not necessarily always want to hear the complexity of the solve. They just want to hear someone say, we can figure that out, or better, here's a couple options of how we can do this and how we trade it off. But I think some of the solutions I'm particularly proud of that the Disney Imagineers and engineers have come up with, for anyone who's had a chance to go to the Pandora, the land at Animal Kingdom that's dedicated to the Avatar intellectual property, there's a ride where you're going through the bioluminescent forest in a little boat. And at the very end of the ride, there's this unbelievable animatronic figure that's a shaman, and she's playing musical instruments and singing. And it's really difficult engineering because the moment on her limbs are really long. If you remember that movie, you know, the characters are like 7 feet tall and really thin. So, you know, you got a lot of force on that movement, and she's swaying her arms and that kind of thing. And we couldn't fit in all the feedback cabling we needed without making the arms look too beefy and then not look like the movie. And we actually created this vest for her that looks like it's woven out of natural material, but it's actually all the feedback wiring. And I'm particularly proud of it because it's really clever. You're hiding in plain sight something that's very critical to what you're trying to do, but because you can disguise it a little bit, it looks like it was meant to be instead of what it really is. And I love the challenge of that. Actually, it's way more fun to me than, you know, take this block of stainless steel and mill something out of it.
Okay. Next, we have Nikita Gupta.
Hi, it's so nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So my question is, I'm also in the engineering field, and I know often it's depicted in like a dull light. So my question is, how does Disney encourage creativity in more technical fields like engineering?
Yeah, Disney, we're all about creativity. So there's very little that you do in an engineering field at Disney that's not going to require that creative spirit. And so it's really easy. I didn't find that when I worked at General Mills because it was a very standards-based company by design, right? It's better for the maintenance team if every Cheerios line uses the exact same sensors and the exact same configuration, because it's just that much easier to fix when something goes wrong. And I really missed that creative bent. I mean, even the human interfaces that showed if the line was working or not, there was a whole standard of what are these shapes and what are these colors, and all of it had to conform to that. So that was not very creative. On the other hand, when I worked for Allen Bradley, they're Rockwell Automation now, but it was super creative because we had all these different product lines and it was a technical sales job. And so we had all these different manufacturers that made everything from cars to muffins to, you name it, the product could figure out how to do it. And so I was always trying to help these different clients figure out what's the most efficient way to create the thing it is that they create. So I think when you're choosing a job, it's really important to find one that allows you to use those creative skills if that's what you feel drawn to do. And it's in such high demand. There's Sheryl Sandberg in her book Lean In talked about when she was debating whether to take the job at Facebook or not. And there was, she wasn't, her title at Google was a little bit higher. And did she really want to leave that for this other position? And one of her mentors said, Sheryl, when someone offers you a seat on the rocket ship, you don't argue over which seat you're in. And I think there's a little bit of, when you have that creative bent, you have the ability to ride a whole bunch of different rocket ships. There's a whole lot of newly formed companies that want people that have the creative plus the engineering, because that's innovation. So I mean, find a place and don't wait for someone to tell you how to use it. Just offer up, here's a way I think we can make this better. And you'll be able to put your fingerprint on a lot of interesting things.
All right, next up, we have Trenton.
Hi, Rachel.
Yeah.
So my question for you is kind of like regarding, I guess, like your position, right? And I use the term like CEO just because, this kind of whole speakers is kind of like surrounded the CEO. And I know you're, VP and whatnot. But anywho, though, my question is, are all CEO positions handpicked within a company? For example, does upper level leadership seek out an up and coming employee that they feel would fit the bill and help them accelerate to the position? If this is the case, how do you suggest standing out from other colleagues when first starting out at a new company?
Yeah, and I don't think there's a way that it's done. You know, it's Disney tends to like to promote from within because our business is very unique and complex, and you know, we don't feel like you could take the head of engineering at General Motors and you know plop them into leading engineering at Disney, and that it's transferable enough that that you can thrive. That's not to say that we don't hire externally for some executive roles, but the higher you get up in the company, the more we tend to promote from within. So as far as how do you get those promotional experiences, when we were building Animal Kingdom, we had this problem with our Kilimanjaro safari vehicles. And most of our rides, if you've been on Splash Mountain or those types of rides, there's what we call the wayside. And so there's sensors, and the sensors sense that a log is there, and that triggers an audio. So as you're going past, you know, Burr Bear, it triggers the audio he's supposed to say. We couldn't do that in Kilimanjaro Safari because we didn't know where the animals could be. It's completely free ranging with the animals, but we wanted to have sort of this storyline woven through about this researcher and ranger that were in an airplane ahead. And because we couldn't do it by timing, knowing that you may have to stop as a rhino crosses the road or what have you, we have this whole RF system in the vehicles where it would read these RF pucks, and then it would translate that into this audio player, and the driver would interact with it. Anyway, I say that to say every day at noon, the audio would stop working. And we couldn't figure out why. It worked fine in the morning. And so it always happened at noon. So it had to be one of two things, right? It was either the heat of the day or it was the vibration of the vehicles going around and around. And so I had all my stuff out, you know, my meter and my accelerometer reader and all this. And I was right at the edge of Safari. So as soon as they had a failure of the audio, they would pull the truck off and I could go in and do this diagnostic. And the vice president of the park, like the most important guy of the park, you know, he was used to everywhere he went, people would just sort of fawn on him and be like, oh, Bob, what can we do for you? You know? And so I'm trying to, you know, like my head's all the way into this control box trying to fix it. And I see this feed and like, what you doing? And I'm like, I'm fixing the audio on this vehicle. And I knew it was Bob's feed, like everybody knew Bob, you know, but my job was to fix the vehicle. And there was a manager spot open at the time. I was an engineer. And I found out later that after that interaction, Bob went to my boss and said, I want her to be the manager because she wants to get stuff fixed. She doesn't want FaceTime. So, you know, you'll get a lot of people that advise you how to network and how to schmooze. I don't do any of that. I've never done any of that. I just feel like if I'm great at what I do, my work will speak for itself. And I found that to be true. So, you know, I've been lucky. The one thing I will tell you is pick your boss carefully. When I started at Disney, the boss that I was working for was leading controls engineering. He was a very nice guy. He was not a very good leader. And I saw a manager that was leading the maintenance team at Animal Kingdom that I just felt was a really brilliant leader. And I went to him and I said, I want to be part of your team. I don't care what the job is. Anything on your team, I want to do it. And at the time I thought, this is career suicide. I'm leaving engineering to work for maintenance, you know? And, but I felt like this is what I need to be great at what I do. I need to work for a leader that's really going to teach me the ropes and, you know, is really smart and has a lot of Disney knowledge. And it ended up being the best thing I could have possibly done because he got promoted and I got promoted. And, you know, it's not who you know, it's who knows what you know, you know? So I think most people don't realize it's within your control to pick your leader. Wherever you get your first job, look around and see who's amazing and then work your way into being on that person's team so that you learn from them. You know, I always tell people, I don't have an MBA, but I have a PhD from the School of Volley. So Jeff Volley is my boss at Disney. And he's one of the most brilliant human beings I've ever met in my life. And I have learned so much from working for him. And I've made a conscious choice to continue working for him in a bunch of different functions because I know how smart he is and how much I can learn from him. And I highly, highly recommend you make a really calculated effort to choose a smart boss.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for such a thorough response. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Okay, sounds good. So a lot of people have a similar question. So I'm gonna have Asha ask her question next, and perhaps I'll add a little bit to it, to cater to all of the questions.
Hello?
Hi, Asa.
Hi. So my question was, so how do you suggest how do you advertise yourself to employers? Like what traits do you need in order to make yourself stand out from other people who are also in your field? And what kind of activities would you suggest, like outside of school, that would make you look better?
Great question. Yeah, I really like people who use their leadership skills in a way that's not just compensated. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously everybody's got to pay for school, and it's fine, it's good to work jobs, but when I see people who are either part of professional organizations, Society of Women Engineers, NSBE, SHIP, those kinds of organizations, or do things for Habitat for Humanity or Boys and Girls Club, or kind of find that sweet spot where it's an organization that helps the world, but you can really use your technical skills. What they need is something special you've got that can help advance the goal. To me, that's absolutely the top thing I look for in a resume.
So yeah, couple of questions more were related, saying how do I stand out, and I think that was a good answer. Last question I'd like to ask you is, this was an anonymous question. What is your favorite Disney character and why?
Oh, well, that's easy. For sure, it's Shuri from Black Panther, because she is both a princess and an engineer, and there is nothing cooler in the world, and she has the coolest clothes ever. So she is my top character. It used to be Mrs. Incredible for a long time, but nobody can top Shuri.
That was good to know. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for your time today with all of us. This was extremely helpful, and I'm sure all of us gained a lot from this session. So do you have any last words for all of us?
Just hang in there. You're going to absolutely love the other side when you're creating and you're innovating and you're bringing new products to market and you're part of a company where you really believe in the vision. I'm a big believer in being happy. If you haven't read The Happiness Advantage by Sean Achor, it's one of my favorite books in the world. Just really about training your mind for optimism. And you're at a great school. I still distinctly remember the first time I set foot on the campus at Michigan State, and just the sense of community amongst the student body was so different from any other place I'd been. So take advantage of all the amazing other people that are on this call. And when I was in school, you asked before mistakes I made when I was in school. And I kind of felt like, if I reach out to my fellow students and ask for help and say, I don't understand this, can you explain it to me? Then they'll think less of me, and I'll look foolish. And I really wish I would have instead leveraged what a great community there is amongst my fellow students, because we're all here to help each other, and you're all here to help each other. And the best way to learn is to teach and take advantage of the amazing community and environment there is at Michigan State, even if it's virtual.